America is deeply divided over what's needed to protect voter and election integrity. Hans von Spakovsky, who previously served on the Federal Election Commission, says there needs to be some major corrections. First of all, what is the greatest threat to our elections today?
The ease with which fraud can be committed undetected and then not investigated and not prosecuted by election officials and law enforcement officials.
What would you say are some of the biggest fraud cases out there that you've documented?
I wrote a case study years ago about a very large election fraud case that was prosecuted by the Justice Department in Chicago. Almost every kind of fraud occurred in that election. Over 60 individuals were prosecuted and convicted of election fraud. Two other just quick examples. 1997, the Miami mayor's race was overturned by a judge. The judge estimated there had been at least 5,000 fraudulent ballots cast in that election. And don't forget, just 3 years ago, 2018, the 9th congressional district race in North Carolina was overturned and a new election held because of absentee ballot fraud in that election.
You've written a book, Hans, with John Fund called Our Broken Elections, How the Left Changed the Way You Vote. You outline changes that need to take place. What are they?
Well, we have a whole list of recommendations at the end of the book after we've documented the problems. And it's everything, it's just common sense things, such as requiring an ID when you vote, both in person and through the absentee balloting process. Actually verifying the residential address that someone claims as to where they're living, when they're registering to vote, verifying citizenship to make sure that somebody really is a U.S. citizen when they're registering to vote, and taking very basic steps to maintain the accuracy of voter registration rolls to make sure that when people die or when they move out of state, they're taken off the rolls so that their names can't be used to cast illegal ballots.
Did the contentious presidential election in 2020 prompt this book?
Well, no, John Fund and I have been writing about this for a long time. In fact, our first book came out almost a decade ago. But last year's election really accelerated the unfortunate push by folks on the progressive left to change the rules and basically get rid of the kind of safety and security protocols that states have in place. And they use COVID-19 as excuse. I mean, an example of that is that they've been pushing a bill, trying to get a bill passed through Congress, H.R. 1, that would ban or void all state voter ID laws. I mean, there is no reason to do that other than to make it easy to cheat in elections.
Why are some of these new rules so dangerous?
Well, take what I just talked about, the trying to wipe out voter ID laws. At the very same time, the left has been pushing same-day voter registration. That means that states would have to allow you to walk into a polling place on Election Day, register, and immediately vote. When you combine this with the fact that they can't ask you for an ID, it would make it very easy for someone to go from one polling place to another, register under false name, vote, and then go to another polling place and do it again. And even if election officials are suspicious, they can't ask you for an ID.
And looking further into the voter ID issue, why are some of the most basic election laws, like voter ID, being challenged in our politically divided culture? You talked a little bit about this, but delve into it more with us.
Sure. You know, there's an interesting dichotomy here. The American public overwhelmingly, for example, thinks that requiring an ID to verify your identity when you vote is common sense, and they support it. And by the way, the polling shows that's regardless of which political party they support or what their ethnic or racial background is. Unfortunately, the progressive left, very liberal advocacy organizations, and Democratic leaders like Joe Biden and others are constantly railing that voter ID is voter suppression. That's not true, but I think they do that. I mean, the only reasons can be that, one, they're trying to scare voters into thinking that someone's trying to keep them from voting because they think that'll get their voters out. But second, I think it's a way of, unfortunately, making it easier for folks to cheat in elections, which is not a good thing.
And quickly, we're almost out of time, but what do you think we should do before the next election?
I think more states in the upcoming legislative sessions in the states should pass election reforms the way Texas, Georgia, and Florida did at the beginning of this year. Other states need to follow their lead and put in the kind of remedies that those states did.
Okay, Hans von Spakovsky with the Heritage Foundation and author of Our Broken Elections, How the Left Changed the Way You Vote. Thanks for your time, sir.